Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Today, or tonight rather, is Celtics versus Lakers night, which is always a fun day for not just basketball fans, but you and me specifically, Sap, because that's all we really care about in the show is what we think. It's our two teams that we follow. Granted, I've always been a Celtics fan, and you are more of a journeyman fan.
Yeah, I was a Laker fan in the 80s because Magic Johnson was my favorite player. And that was very, risky in the city of Boston to be a Lakers
Right.
fan in the 80s, liking Magic Johnson. I wasn't when Kobe and Shaq were there. I'm a LeBron guy. So I went from Cleveland to Miami, back to Cleveland. Now I'm in LA. If LeBron was on the Denver Nuggets, I'd be a Denver Nuggets fan. So we'll see what happens tonight. We've got our two teams in the case of misery loves company because they've both disappointed so far this year. And it's really tough to look at these two teams and figure out what the hell's wrong and what can they be going forward, because we're already a month into the season and neither looks any better than they did a year ago, which is kind of perplexing.
Sap, I know that you call yourself the oldest millennial ever, and I feel like it's really true with your sports fandom. I feel like a lot of younger fans seem to root less for the laundry or the cities or the teams and more for the players. So maybe there's something. Maybe you're very ahead of your time.
I am. I'm Benjamin Button. I'm aging in reverse, right? Because obviously with Aaron Rodgers, if he's not in Green Bay next year, I'll be following him and being a fan of whatever team he's on. Although I think he's going to be back in Green Bay next year. I don't want to get any more discussions with Aaron Rodgers. I wasn't crazy about what he did, but it's still my guy, and I think they have a chance to win the Super Bowl. But yeah, I'm a slut, so I'm fine with that. I just follow my favorite player wherever my favorite player is. I went from being a Pirates fan to a San Francisco Giants fan because of Barry Bonds. And then when Bonds retired, I just stuck with the Giants and was fortunate to see them win 3 World Series titles.
Maybe it's like musical chairs, wherever the guy ends up retiring, that's the team that you stick with until you find a new guy.
Could be.
But anyways, you are currently a Lakers fan because LeBron James does indeed play for that franchise. They are in Boston tonight. Neither team has started out particularly well to start the season. Celtics are currently a game under 500, 7-8. Lakers are exactly 500 at 8-8. Though when we've talked about this before, Sap, I hear a lot of the chirping from Celtics fans and more so the media covering the Celtics. Well, the Lakers were title favorites and they're basically in the exact same spot as the Celtics. It's not the same situation. The Lakers have won a championship recently. LeBron James has been out. I know Jaylen Brown has been out for the Celtics, who, those aren't the same player. So I do think even though these two teams their records are virtually identical, they're not in the same place right now.
No, because the Lakers have the ability at the trade deadline or maybe sooner to flip their roster. They'll go ahead and do that because that's what LeBron did in Cleveland 4 years ago. What exactly are the Celtics going to do to improve this roster as we approach the trade deadline? Marcus Smart, Robert Williams III, those are the two candidates that you would think would bring back something. They both had their contracts extended in the offseason, so they can't be moved until the beginning of January. So that's still, a month and a half away. What exactly do the Celtics have to trade to improve this roster? Not much, unless if they want to start a total rebuild and look at Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, which I don't think would be the wisest thing to do right now. The Lakers, they have a bunch of parts that they could flip for a bunch of other parts, and maybe that will work because they do have LeBron James, who generally makes these things work, and you still have Anthony Davis, despite being totally outplayed by Giannis the other night, is still an elite player. And, they're still hoping that Russell Westbrook is better in the second half of the year than he is in the first half of the year, which is normally the case with Westbrook. We saw that last year in Washington. He played better in the second half of the year. Washington played better in the second half of the year. Same thing even happened the year before in Houston. So it maybe takes a couple of months for Westbrook to get used to his teammates and vice versa. That could be the case. But the Lakers are in a better position because when LeBron comes back, if he comes back tonight against the Celtics or shortly thereafter, they become a much better team at that point just by having him on the court.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Celtics don't have anybody, even, at his advanced age, the Celtics don't have anybody at the caliber of LeBron James. And, I'm not a LeBron sycophant or anything like that, but I mean, that's obvious. You don't have to be a LeBron sycophant to recognize that. And as far as the Lakers trading pieces for other pieces, they don't have, outside of their obvious, LeBron and Anthony Davis, they don't have any like particularly valuable pieces, but maybe you're right. It is just like fresh faces, maybe a little bit people who are better fits. Maybe that will be enough. And I don't think that they even necessarily need to do that, Sep. I think it's just they need all the guys to be healthy at the same time and develop chemistry. I think that's the biggest thing for the Lakers right now. I don't even necessarily think that they have to make these wholesale changes. I just think it's having LeBron be on the court for an extended period of time and he'll figure things out. I don't see that it's a fundamentally flawed roster like the Celtics is, because we just haven't seen enough of it, when it's at its entirety. So I just don't think it's that desperate of a situation for LA right now. Now, obviously, their window is really, really small because LeBron's getting up there in age. And once LeBron goes, as you've seen with his absence, the team just, Anthony Davis can't be the guy on a team, it doesn't seem. So they got to figure it out soon. But for this year, I still think they're fully capable of winning a championship, despite what their record says in their slow start. I didn't expect them to start very fast anyways.
And even recently, I think Westbrook's play is elevated. And of course, Taylor Horton Tucker, THT, has been a player who has got a short sample size, but he's only 20 years old. He's come in this year and averaged 23, 6 and 6 in limited time over 3 games. Not a big sample, but THT is a player that is 20 years old and ascending. The Celtics don't have a young player like that. I mean, the Celtics have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. We both agree are all-star players. After that, they've got some veterans who've played okay this year, Dennis Schroeder or Al Horford. But, I mean, I have more faith in THT being an impact player right now than Romeo Langford or Aaron Nesmith. I mean, first of all, THT is a few years younger than those guys and already seems to be more advanced, and he seems to have a good relationship and good chemistry with LeBron, which is obviously very important in Los Angeles. So, I think that they just have a bunch of guys that at some point you would think Frank Vogel, the coaching staff, which includes LeBron James, in fact, he may be the head coach, but at some point they're going to see who fits, who doesn't fit, and then they weed out those that don't fit and go with those who fit. Carmelo Anthony's had a really nice start to his season. I don't understand why they played DeAndre Jordan or Dwight Howard much at all. All I heard off season was that Anthony Davis was going to play more in the 5, and now he doesn't want to. But their best lineup would have Anthony Davis at the 5, probably LeBron and Westbrook on the floor, even though Westbrook has a tendency to get in the way. Maybe Carmelo and THT rounds out their top 5 guys, but none will come back, maybe contribute, and they'll find out who works and who doesn't work. Right now they use 14 players. You can't have 14 players looking for minutes. It just doesn't work out. There's 240 minutes in a game. If you're trying to dish out minutes evenly, this is similar to like an all-star game, right? Like who gets 12 minutes, who gets 16 minutes. That just doesn't work. And one combination the Lakers should never have on the floor together is Rondo and Westbrook, because you have 2 non-shooters. Oftentimes it feels like you're playing 3-on-5 because those guys aren't going to stretch the defense. So I think they'll figure it out and start to get some pace going here. But again, a lot of this falls on LeBron. Is he still one of the 3 best players in the league? I think the answer to that is yes. But we're going to have to see as he comes back from yet another injury. And is Anthony Davis ever going to elevate to becoming great? The strange thing about Anthony Davis, Jed, is oftentimes when a guy wins a championship, it kind of gives him a sense of relief. And now he brings his game up to another level, right? I think we're seeing that with Giannis. Giannis has his championship. He's playing better than ever this year. It's like he loved winning so much he wants to win again. With Anthony Davis, he wins a championship, signs a huge contract, follows that up with his worst year last year. He actually looked out of shape to me, and he's playing better this year, but he's still not the guy that he should be, right? Giannis absolutely destroyed him the other night in that matchup against Milwaukee. A game the Lakers could have very easily won if Davis could have at least played Giannis to a draw, and it wasn't even close to that. And we know Milwaukee ended up winning by 7 points. So that's the mystifying thing about Anthony Davis. Oftentimes, look at what Jordan did. Once he broke through and won a championship, he never lost again. Kobe had that mentality. Magic and Bird, the thirst for winning just kept fueling them. I don't sense that with Anthony Davis. I do with Giannis, and that's a big difference between those players.
Yeah, I mean Anthony Davis, I think most people would say he's more naturally talented than
Sure.
Giannis, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean,
Nope.
Giannis is just like people could say he's more naturally talented. I don't think anybody would disagree that Giannis is the far better player. I mean,
Right now it's not even
night.
discussing. No, Giannis. The big four in basketball, Jet, would be. I think Giannis is the best player in the sport right now. Hell, he's the defending champ, and he plays both ends of the floor. But there's him, Durant, Curry, and LeBron. Those are probably your four best players in the sport. And of the four, Giannis is the best defender because he's physically in his prime. He's younger than those guys.
Right.
Yeah, there's no discussion who's better, Anthony Davis or Giannis. Although you're right. Davis is more skilled. It's just Giannis busts his ass and goes out there every night and is a leader and wants to win, where Anthony Davis seems to be more of a follower.
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating. I think that, we've seen enough of a sample size with LeBron out of the lineup between last year and this year when Anthony Davis is in the lineup that he's not a guy who can be the guy on a championship team. Certainly, we know he can be the second guy on a title team. They've already won. But there is something about him that it's just you can't build the whole team around his identity and his game. It just doesn't work. As far as the Celtics go, Sap, I think you raised a good point in terms of their player development has just been crap. Either it's their scouting, their player development, or both. Outside of Tatum and Brown, it took them essentially they were forced into developing Rob Williams because Danny Ainge traded Daniel Tice last year and Brad Stevens had to play Rob Williams. But they were not developing him at all until literally a trade forced their hands to do it. And with Neesmith and Langford, two other lottery picks, they haven't really developed at all. And Peyton Pritchard, who looked promising as a rookie, they've sapped him of all of his confidence. He looks like a shell of himself. He may be out of the NBA in a year, Sap, at this rate, because I think they've ruined him. The Celtics are a mess. I mean, the Lakers, obviously their record's the same, but it's just not the same situation at all. The Celtics, they show no ability to elevate their game to a championship level or even a winning a playoff round level, in my opinion. I just don't see any sort of consistency. And I think a big problem with them too is that the way the fans and the media, for the most part, react about them is even when they lose games, it's all about silver linings and this sort of thing. Like, if I'm a Celtics player and I'm reading that, like, I'm just going to keep saying, oh yeah, but what I'm doing is fine. Like, everybody's saying, our defense is so much better and stuff like that. There's no change in this team from game 1 to whatever they're in game 16, game 17. They're the exact same team that they were to start the year. And I know it's still relatively early, but there's been no change. I've watched every second of every game, Sap. They're the exact same team.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're 2-3 at home. You should have a home court advantage. They don't. The home opener, they lost by 32 points to Toronto, a team that they should be better than. Then, of course, they had a 14-point lead going into the fourth quarter against Chicago, and they lost by 14. I didn't think a team could be outscored by 28 points in one quarter in the NBA, let alone the fourth quarter. Well, that happened against the Chicago Bulls. Then later on, you're playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you get outscored 29-15 in the fourth quarter. Again, you should be better than Cleveland. So you're leaving a lot of winnable games on the cutting room floor. You're not taking care of business. And again, to your point, Jet, the lack of player development, Romeo Langford and Aaron Neesmith were mid-first round picks, right? These weren't late first round picks, mid-first round picks. They're barely averaging 29 minutes per game. I want to see more from them. Let them make their mistakes. Let them develop. I don't think the Celtics are in a championship mode right now, but I want to see what those two young guys can do. Yeah, let's see more of Peyton Pritchard. I mean, Josh Richardson's a veteran. He does some nice things, but we know what his ceiling is. Let's see more of Langford and Neesmith. You go back to their most recent loss Wednesday at Atlanta, 11 of 41 from 3 points. That's 27%. Like, at some point, the Celtics think they're a really good 3-point shooting team. Well, they're not. This year,
Right.
they're averaging 32% from three. That's 27th in the league. And a big part of that problem is their best player, Jason Tatum, is shooting 32% from 3-point territory. A couple of years ago, he was around 40%. That's a major drop off. Even Dennis Schroeder, who's been a pleasant surprise this year, he's shooting 33% from three. They're not a good 3-point shooting team, yet they hoisted up 41 3-pointers in that loss to the Atlanta Hawks. They're not playing into their strengths, they're playing into their weaknesses, and they're not good enough to overcome that.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And this was what the team was like under Brad Stevens a lot too, is that they sort of bomb away from three. And, a lot of teams do this, but they're just not very adept at it. Outside of Tatum and Brown, there's nobody that I'm like, yeah, I really want you to shoot a three on the team. I guess Pritchard and Neesmith, but they never play those guys, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, they're not a good 3-point shooting team, but they take a lot. It seems to be their strategy. And again, we're getting close to that 20 game mark for my assessment of Coach Udoka, but I'm still trying to hold off. But it's been difficult to praise any aspect of his coaching so far. Sap, it just, yeah, they're not a good team. They don't play to their strengths. They don't run on the fast break. They settle for half court basketball, which they shouldn't at all, considering that they're young and athletic. They don't have really any sort of true point guard on the roster. So the offense is kind of run by sort of a piecemeal of Marcus Smart and Dennis Schroeder, who aren't necessarily the best decision makers offensively. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a team that is the exact same as last year. There's no marked improvement. And people telling you otherwise, which is a lot of people on Twitter, are crazy. I don't know how they can look at some games and say, well, I feel good about how the defense is going on. Like, just be honest, this isn't a good team. And you said earlier, Sap, that trading Tatum or Brown might not be the solution, but I'd rather them at this point go backwards than stay stuck in the mud, which is where they are right now. They're directionless right now. At least backwards is a direction. I don't want them to go backwards. I'm not saying I want them to be bad or worse, but I'd like them to make a bold move, at least where I feel like they're paying, at least management and ownership is paying attention to the team. It seems like they're just content to, go through every season, and every season is the same 500, oh, we can sell jerseys and tickets because we have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but that's not good enough. And to constantly be comparing yourself to Lakers because you have the same amount of championships as them, and look at your records and say they're the same, and then say your teams are the same, well, that's just foolish. The Lakers have LeBron James. They have Anthony Davis. They're both better players than any guys that you have in your roster. I mean, I hate to admit that because I hate the Lakers and I love the Celtics, but that's just a fact. And the Lakers have a far higher chance of figuring things out this year and becoming not a 500 team than you do. That's just a fact, not opinion. And I don't know why a lot of people can't see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, since the turn of the century, the Lakers have 6 championships. The Celtics have 1. I mean, again, the Celtics have won 1 championship in 35 years. So, I mean, at some point, you've got to say that was great before that, since they have as many championships as Dallas and Toronto. They each have 1 since the 1986 season. So at some point, you've got to prove yourself again. And look, I think Tatum and Brown, let's see what they are together and healthy. And then also, let's just see what Aaron Neesmith and Romeo Langford can do. Give them some run. Let's not play them 4 minutes one night, 17 the next night. If they miss a shot, they get benched. Like, give them some consistent minutes. Let's see what they can do. Throw them out there without the life preserver. Let's see if they can sink or swim. That's the way I would look at it, because they're not in a championship window right now. Let's see what these young guys can do. Develop players. This is something they're not good at. They were before, when Brad Stevens first got here. They would take other teams' trash and turn it into, shiny toys. Well, they're not doing that anymore. So that's a real problem. So I would like to see more of those young guys. Get them out there. Let's see what they can get. Get Brown healthy. Once again, with the Celtics, I don't know what goes on with their training staff. It was supposed to be a short time that Jaylen Brown was out. Well, he's still out. So
right.
Lord knows what the situation is with that. We thought in 2009 that Kevin Garnett was coming back quickly, and he never did. So that's another issue for probably a whole other podcast. But yeah, just let's see what these young kids can do. Go from there. Whereas the Lakers are in a different situation because they do have LeBron, they do have Anthony Davis. I think Westbrook is starting to play a little better, if that's a positive look. And look, THT is better than any of the secondary players the Celtics have. I mean, he's only 20 years old, and he seems to be getting better every game. So at least they have the ability to know that, okay, we're going to bring back LeBron. Maybe that wakes Anthony Davis up, and things can kind of fit together once everybody's healthy there in LA.
Yeah. Again, when I've said this before, by the Bucks slow start too, once you have the title under your belts, it's a completely different mentality in the regular season, and you play with a completely different level of confidence. Even when you lose games, you're still like, well, okay, we know we can do this because we've done it before. For some reason, the Celtics over the past couple of years have tried to fool themselves into thinking getting to the Eastern Conference Finals was the same thing as winning a championship. And so they'll, say, oh, well, the regular season doesn't really matter. We don't have to get up for every game. Seeding doesn't matter for us. We go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Well, that's not an accomplishment. That doesn't mean anything. No. So it's a mess. It's a mess in Boston without a doubt. And, if LeBron James remains on the sideline for extended periods of time, then it's going to be a mess in LA. But I just don't think that's going to be the case.
No, he's a nice guy to add to the equation at some point, right? He comes back healthy, committed, and gets things rolling. Because I actually look at the East being stronger than the West in terms of depth. Golden State right now is the best team in basketball by leaps and bounds, and you can make a case that Phoenix is the second best team in basketball, but I think they'll come back to earth at some point. I don't see Golden State winning 70 games and Phoenix winning 64 games. I don't think that is going to happen. The East is deeper, though. I mean, you get even a team like an Atlanta that's on the outside looking into the playoff race, but we see what they can do when healthy and committed. They laid a beating on the Celtics a couple nights ago. It was a pretty convincing win by Atlanta without Trae Young scoring a lot of points because he's such a great facilitator, got his other guys involved. So, yeah, things are going to have to change in Boston, and the Lakers have to get healthy, and we'll go from there. We're a little more than a month into the season. So they meet tonight at TD Garden, and then they meet again in a couple weeks at Staples Center, which will no longer be Staples Center going forward on Christmas Day when it changes its name.
Yes, they're changing it to crypto.com arena.
Yeah, crypto.com. That's not an easy thing to say. Crypto.com arena. That's a tough one.
Staples Center flows a little bit better.
It did, but for the amount of money that crypto.com is paying,
$700 million.
Yeah, which is kind of weird, right? Because you look at what Staples Center cost to build back in 1999. It was $375 million. In today's dollars, that's about $600 million. This naming agreement is 20 years, $700 million, which comes to $35 million a year. And most people on the surface look at that and say, that's insane, right? $35 million to name an arena. Well, that's a pretty prominent building, right? You've got the Lakers, the Clippers, the Kings, the Sparks, the Grammys are held there every year, right?
Yes.
So you have over 200 events. It's freaking Los Angeles. Just think about all of the concerts that take place. If there's 200 events a year, Jet, it's $175,000 per event for the naming rights. That's the way you break it down. You don't think when the Grammys are on national TV and 30 million people are watching and they keep talking about coming to you from the crypto.com arena, that means something. And again, this is 20 years. So in 8 years, that's going to look like a mere pittance compared to the numbers today. So these companies don't do this without putting a lot of research into it. And really, you can make a case that among the indoor arenas, that's the most prominent indoor arena in the country because there's no naming rights for Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
They're just going to leave it Madison Square Garden. So of the rest of the indoor arenas, I would say that Staples Center, soon to be crypto.com arena, is the biggest facility, most famous facility in the country.
Sure. And you always get when you get the aerial shots of Los Angeles, you always see the Staples Center and the big Staples logo on top, which obviously they're going to change into a crypto.com arena logo. So that's, great branding right there as well. And, sometimes it fails. Everybody remembers, everybody here at least remembers that it was CMGI Stadium for a season before it became Gillette Stadium. That company folded. They spent too much money on the naming rights, and they just didn't have any more money left. So, it could backfire. I know crypto.com has some big, endorsers, Matt Damon, I think Tom Brady behind it. So they obviously have some money behind it. And they really, it seems like cryptocurrency is blowing up. So even though I don't know that much about it, I think that the fact that they appear to be some sort of hub for trading it, it's probably very beneficial for them to have more and more people know about what it is. And, going to their website, that's how they, that's how their business model works. So it seems good. And as far as Staples goes, they've got to be happy to get $700 million in the bank, because their business has been struggling mightily. All these brick and mortar businesses are struggling a lot. So I'm sure their CEOs looked at it and said, yeah, we could use the infusion of cash.
Well, the thing is, now you go from, brick and mortar, and now the new naming rights is something that is kind of not really, it's almost like grasping at water, right? Because it's something I don't know much about, but the value goes up and up and up. I mean, look at Facebook, what it's worth. Look at what Google is worth. Look what all of those high-tech companies are worth. I mean, still Walmart is the biggest company in the country. They've got thousands of stores and, employ 2 million people, and everyone seems to shop there. So yeah, those are tangible places, because they're selling food, and they're selling sneakers, and they're selling
everything. Yeah, not just one thing.
Yeah. Go in there and you can get your eyeglasses there, you can get your pharmaceuticals there. So yeah, those places are always going to be able to spend that money. But yeah, it's an interesting change of venue for Los Angeles. But again, what better building than that, because of all the great events they have there besides the Lakers, Clippers, Sparks, and Kings. Just so many concerts, right? And like I said, the Grammys is a huge event. And great point, Jet, that aerial view of Los Angeles, you always see that building.
Yeah. And it's that because it's, a prime area. They've developed it a lot. I know you haven't been to LA in a while, Sap, but I still go frequently. And when I started college in 2007, it was still a really crappy area. And since then, they've developed it in this whole LA Live area that's, got a ton of, it's very similar to what they're trying to do by the TD Garden, really sort of, gentrify it and make it sort of hip and new and fancy. And that's really what they've done in LA, and it looks great there. So, that's when you see shots of LA, you're going to see that. And, the Lakers, despite all the teams in LA, they are the premier team there. That's their home. That's where the statue of Magic Johnson is. They're going to do, they're going to do the aerial shots there, and people are going to, that's a landmark in LA. Tourists are going to go to that spot, when they go to LA. So yeah, I mean, it's like you said, besides Madison Square Garden, which doesn't have any naming rights, if you were looking at any other, sort of stadium or basketball arena, at least to purchase naming rights for, that would be at the top of the list, in my opinion.
LA is a strange city in a sense that of all the major cities that have all the 4 major sports, it may be the only one where the NFL is third, right? Because LA is Lakers, Dodgers, or Dodgers, Lakers. They're the 2 most prominent franchises. And then you go to the NFL. And oh, by the way, I still don't think the most popular pro football team in Los Angeles plays in Los Angeles. I still think the Raiders are the most popular team in LA. I mean, you've been there. You probably see more Raider gear than Rams or Chargers. I've made a case that the Chargers are like the 8th most popular football team in LA.
They have no fans.
They have no fans. They essentially play 17 road games. Every time they're playing at home. Last week, there were a bunch of Vikings fans in there. When the Packers go there, there's a ton of Packers fans.
A ton of Patriots fans there the other week,
No one is a Chargers fan.
Right.
And I think you could make a case that obviously the Raiders and Rams are more popular than the Chargers. I think the Cowboys, Packers, and Steelers are more popular because those are the 3 national brands in the NFL, the Packers, Cowboys, and Steelers. You can make a case, obviously, in LA that USC and UCLA are more popular than the Chargers. So the Chargers are like the 8th most popular football team in Los Angeles. And again, 2 most popular teams in that city remain the Lakers and the Dodgers. Their brands are so enormous. So LA is kind of strange in that sense. Most every other major city, the biggest team is the football team, except for in Los Angeles.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't even think of a major city where the football team
It
isn't
used
the
to be
most popular
here.
team.
Yeah, it used to be here. The Red Sox were. Now the
Right.
Patriots are. So yeah, I
If they
mean,
surpassed them a while ago, the Patriots.
I'd say about 12, 13 years ago, they kind of surpassed it. But I think when the Patriots went undefeated and it was everybody, us against them, that they became even bigger, even though they didn't win the Super Bowl. New York, I mean, the Yankees are huge, but so are the Giants. That they're probably 1 and 2 in that city.
Yeah, it could
Um,
be the Yankees. That's fair. It could
could be. Yeah,
totally be the Yankees.
even in Chicago, the Bears are huge, the Cubs are big, but not third. I mean,
Right.
the football teams are third in in LA, and again, the most popular team. I still think maybe the numbers won't back me up on this. The most popular team in Los Angeles remains the Raiders.
Yeah, it certainly could be the case. That wouldn't shock me either. Sap, last story as we do our LA Boston show before we get out of here. Celtics reserve big man. I say that because he barely plays. Ennis Cantor. We all know he's an activist. And this season he set his sights on China. Um, Totally legitimate reasons too. There's a lot of human rights violations going on there. And he's done it by doing his shoes, sort of with different political messages every game. And he tweets a lot about the different human rights violations going on in China. And his latest tweet yesterday was directed at the best player on the Celtics opponent tonight, LeBron James of the Lakers. This was Enes Kanter's tweet. Money over morals for the king, in quotation marks. Sad and disgusting how these athletes pretend they care about social justice. They really do shut up and dribble when big boss China, the Chinese flag, says so. Did you educate yourself about the slave labor that made your shoes, or is that not part of your research? Strong words from Enes Cantor, who definitely does do his research and has not even allowed back in his home country of Turkey because he's been so strong against their government in terms of criticizing it. What's your sort of take on directly calling out another player, Sab?
This is what Ennis Cantor does, and I support him. And even though he's attacking LeBron James, why not go? If you're going to go bear hunting, go after the grizzly, right? Go after the biggest athlete in the country who is a social activist, but has been mum on what's taken place in China. And we go back a year ago when Sixers president Daryl Morey got in some hot water because he was critical of China, and now the NBA's lost hundreds of millions of dollars because the Chinese government decided they were going to not show NBA games there anymore because of that criticism. I give Enes Kanter all the credit in the world for doing this. It's made difficult though because he just doesn't play. Like, I mean, we're going to see the game tonight. Will ESPN make a story out of this? Probably not. Maybe they will, but he's going to be on the sideline, with his sneakers rather than on the court. If he was a more prominent player, then it would be a bigger story. But since he's not, maybe he gets swept under the rug. I give the guy all the credit in the world for doing this. I mean, again, he's lived this. As you said, Jed, he cannot go back to Turkey. There were some issues where they weren't even sure if he was going to go to Canada because there may have been an issue that the Turkish government may have been able to grab him,
Right.
so maybe keep him out of Canada at some point. And he really lives this. And again, when you grow up in a country like Turkey or some of the countries that some of the players grew up in, they've lived this more so than we have in this country. Although, look, I love LeBron. He's been very vocal with social issues. I think the way he didn't communicate what he should have back a year ago by saying, well, that's not my country. That would make some sense and say, I'm critical of my own country, which the United States. I'm not going to criticize other countries. I want to try to make our country better. Maybe if he
Right.
painted that would work that way, but he didn't handle it all that well. Look, I supported Daryl Morey in that because I think China is the most disgusting country in the world when it comes to human rights. And because we're in bed with them, with so many of our businesses, we kind of turn the other way. We
Yes.
don't get involved with that. We'll go after some poor small country that has no impact on us because we want to flex our muscles. With China, we owe them a lot of money. We're in a lot of business with them, so we kind of hold our nose. But no, give Enes Kanter a lot of credit for that. I don't know what the reaction is going to be if LeBron even plays. Does this set him off and he goes out and score 42 points? He just doesn't normally react like that. But Kanter's always been someone who's trolled LeBron. Even when he was with the Knicks, I remember there were some issues with him. And again, what better way to become somewhat relevant? No better way to get relevant by criticizing the best player in the sport or the most famous player in the sport.
Yeah, without a doubt, and it helps him. Cantor's goal is to spread his message as wide as possible, and this certainly, helps with that. And I do think certainly the criticism of China is more than fair. But the criticism of LeBron is fair too, because as great as he has been with some social issues, the way he's framed himself is like he knows everything about, all these sort of social issues, and he's this guy who'll speak out about everything. But the reality is he's been selective about it, and he obviously didn't handle the situation with Daryl Morey very well. He was critical of Daryl Morey and saying like he needs to be more educated on what he's talking about, when LeBron is not particularly educated on this China issue, or if he is, then he's just, ignoring blatant human rights violations there, which would make him look like a hypocrite. Obviously, like you said, if he had framed it the way about, well, I'm, more concerned about the country I live in right now and my people, then that would be a different story. He didn't do that. And we talked about this a lot last season and earlier in the year too. I think he dropped the ball with the vaccine issue as well. So he's sort of selective about what he's an activist about, which is fine. But if you frame yourself to be this guy who's, standing up for all the people all the time, and you don't, well, then you look like a hypocrite, and you look like you're, sort of just like, you're loving your own brand a little bit more than you really
What's
should.
So for you, right? What's convenient for you and what's going to work for you. And it is kind of interesting that Enes Kanter now is the favorite NBA player of Fox News.
Yeah.
Jerry Callahan or Tom Shattuck, both of our friends who are, conservative pundits, radio guys. They love Enes Kanter, kind of like they sidled up to Aaron Rodgers because of the vaccine issue. So, yeah, I mean, people pick their sides and go from there. It's never a lot of nuance involved here. But I give Enes Kanter a ton of credit because I don't think he's monetizing this. He's not a big enough star. It's not like he's going to benefit from this. I think he truly believes what he's saying, and I appreciate that. The only way, if I could have given advice to LeBron a year ago, would have been come out and say, I really can't comment on this because it's not my country. I worry about the unrest, social unrest, issues in my country. I want to try to solve that first. That's something I can't get involved in. At least it kind of says something rather than trying to fight with Daryl Morey, who obviously I think came from a place of knowledge when he criticized the Chinese government. So yeah, that's the best way to do it, is to be active on this. And again, when you start to fight with people on Twitter, it never works, especially when one guy has 75 million followers and the other guy has, how many followers does Daryl Morey have on Twitter?
A couple 100,000 probably. Yeah.
That all the stat nerds are following him, right? But LeBron's got whatever 50 75 million followers on Twitter. So like the guy with all the followers is going to lose that debate. So you have to be a little bit clearer than LeBron was a year ago. And now we'll see what happens with Enes Kanter going forward. But I give Kanter credit for that. Good for him. He's speaking out, and I think he comes from a place of really a lot of research and living this type of life, being from Turkey and obviously even in the United States. I'm sure he walks around looking both ways and behind him to see if there's
he's a political refugee.
He is
exactly. What he is right now.
Yeah, he's truly living this. It's one thing for the rest of us to tweet out what's going on in other countries, and then we go out and go grab dinner and no one knows who the hell we are. This guy lives it. So yeah, that's a perfect way to sum it up, Jed.
The funniest thing is that, yes, Jerry Callahan and Tom Shattuck and all these conservative people at Fox love him right now because he's calling out China, and that's their, they hate China.
He's calling out LeBron James,
and he's calling out LeBron James, but it's showing you how little they actually know about him, because he's a devout Muslim who is liberal and hates President Trump. So,
right.
So yeah, they're picking and choosing.
I tried when I talked to my friends, and I considered Tom and Jerry Callahan friends, and I love and respect them. Don't agree with them, but they were all of a sudden supporting Aaron Rodgers. I'm like, well, Aaron Rodgers is a pretty liberal guy who supported Bernie Sanders.
Right.
It's just that the far left and the far right sometimes are all crazy. You know,
But
it's
it's like
it
Cantor ticks off
anti-vaxxers on the left.
every
He
box
does.
that they
Oh yeah, no, he's
that they wouldn't like.
yeah,
Also
spot.
got vaccinated. So
Yeah, no, he's like, I mean, he Ennis Cantor. I mean, can we call him complicated? Which I think is a compliment. To call him complicated isn't truly a compliment. I'll go with that. How's that sound?
yeah.
There's a little alliteration there. I could be a rapper, a complicated.
You'd
What
be
did I
really
say?
good.
Yeah, I'd be a good rapper. You think so?
Yeah,
Yeah,
excellent. Excellent.
8-year-old fat white guy is a rapper. I'm all
Yep.
for it.
Yeah. It's been weirder things that have happened.
Jazzy J Sap. How's that sound?
Perfect. Love it. Make
Sounds
an
good.
album. We'll record one for you.
Well, and Bob Kraft, the two oldest rappers in the country.
Yes. He's got more street cred than you, though.
Oh, he's got more
And
street
slightly
cred.
more money. Slightly more money.
That's why he's got more street cred. You know, I mean, if I had his money, I'd have street cred too, Jet. You know that.
All right.
That's how.
Well, let's finish the show off with who's going to win the game tonight. Then, Sap, Celtics or Lakers?
I think the Celtics somehow will win. The Lakers are in I don't know where. Again, if LeBron plays, they probably win. If he doesn't play, they lose. I mean, he does have that type of impact. They're 4-2 when he plays, 4-6 when he doesn't play. So use that as a decider. If he plays, I think they win. If he doesn't play, I think the Celtics win. I think Jason Tatum's sitting on a big game. I know he looked a little better against Atlanta.
Yeah.
I think he's sitting like a 38, 40-point game. I mean, he's too good not to have those types of games from time to time. So LeBron plays, the Lakers win. LeBron doesn't play, the Celtics win.
No Jaylen Brown for the Celtics tonight. We still don't know the status of LeBron. The Celtics will lose either way. If LeBron James plays, if he doesn't play, the Celtics will lose tonight. That is my prediction. I'm not going to sit on the fence like you, Sap. I will.
No.
They will lose.
That was my ode to Glenn Ordway. Sit on the fence.
Go. All right. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Again, presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out our social medias. We'll be reacting to the game tonight, of course, at John Sap 25 at Jet Stryer. And you can find the show on YouTube, youtube.com/Jet Stryer, or wherever podcasts are found. Just type in the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. All right, everybody. We will talk to you later. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the game tonight. See ya.